Voices from the Mausoleum is brought to you by the You Run Podcast Network and yourunpodcast.com. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Influential Horror. Back on the channel, the fantastic, super talented Squall Charlson.
What's going on, everyone? Thanks for having me. I know we talked about doing this for a while, so it's fun to actually be here and get to talk about this now.
Yeah. Rather than us just grilling you on your books, which we absolutely love, well, we get to talk about sort of what influences you in horror. What are your favorites? The things that kept you up at night, the stuff you probably saw maybe a little bit too young. All our origins with horror. So I know we sort of talked about, you did a ranking, so we could sort of go in from your 5 to your number 1. So what is sort of let's just kick it off. What is your number 5?
So starting it off, so I'm looking here at my list. My number 5, it was really hard. I just want to say, first of all, to put 5 titles in here. I have if we have time, an honorable mentions.
Absolutely.
But I felt like these 5, hopefully you haven't seen all of them on the show already, and we can kind of talk a little bit about them. My number 5 is It Follows.
Nice.
And
so this was it A24? No, this was
pre-A24.
It was A24. Okay, pre-A24.
Yeah. If it was made nowadays, it would definitely be A24. Blumhouse might even have picked it up. I'm not sure, actually. We'll have to fact check. Someone in the comments, let us know.
Who made this? I think they were going to get a second one too, or rumors, right?
It continues following. Yeah. I don't know.
It just keeps following. So how did this secure your number 5 spot?
So I'm if you don't know a little bit about my background, I'm very big. I went to school, wanted to do filmmaking, wanted to do writing, in terms of screenplays. And so consuming a lot of media across all different genres, horror was always sort of a really nice spot, because as a independent, creator, producer, director, you can take something that is very simple on page and very cheap to produce and turn it into something that hundreds and thousands of millions of people will see. Think of Scream, for instance. That's kind of the bigger idea, budget of that. But you have shorter things like Blair Witch Project that are these shoelace budgets that can just be extrapolated, and it's really up to the creators to really make it pop. And honestly, there hadn't been a lot of horror around that time when I was in college that really was doing it for me. I know they did a remake, an Americanization of Let the Right Ones In.
Mm-hmm.
I was yeah, it is shot really well, but it didn't do anything new. And I feel a lot of movies around that time just wasn't they weren't engaging me and a lot of other people in terms of wow, I haven't seen anything like that.
Right.
Until It Follows came out. And it's the stupidest, simplest idea of let's have a monster that we don't even have to do any practical effects for. We can just have anybody that, is a central character to whoever it's following just be, the monster for a shot or two. We don't even have to show it. The whole opening scene of that movie where it's just the one continuous take and it's revolving around the girl running into her car and going back into the house. It's masterful. And it's so silly to think about filming it and just there's nothing there, And I feel everybody in school that was in on it, and saw that kind of kicked themselves, because it was oh yeah, now everyone's gonna try to do something like that, and why didn't I do that first? But it just in terms of
right,
yeah, it was so new, and it was so like a duh moment. Every good movie you see, it's duh, why did no one make this already? Why hasn't this really been a thing? And then everybody you can kind of see following it will try to do that, but their own version, and it straight to Walmart. But it just stuck with me. Every time I saw it, I kind of got a different idea of the movie, and you kind of piece a little bit things together. I showed it to my now wife. It's one of her favorite movies now, And we watched it a few times, and every time she notices like in the background like something like walking at them, and she's like, "Oh, is that it?" And I'm like, I think so,"
Right,
But
right,
like that's the sort of thing. Is like if you go and see this movie, if you haven't seen it already, it's about people that it's kind of like an allegory for like sexually transmitted diseases, where like you sleep with somebody and they give you this curse, this monster that will not stop, will not sleep, just continues to follow and walk at you until it gets to you, and then it does God knows what. It's kind of different for everybody, but like the sense of dread you feel watching this, and like this person, just walking at the camera.
right.
I went and saw it with like my roommate at the time in college, and we got out of the theater and we were just on the street, and someone was walking down the street at us, and he screamed. I was like, you can't do anything better than that. Like Scream kept me up because I saw that when I was really young, and my mom left me at home all the time, like especially at night, and we lived out in the middle of nowhere. So I'm like, I'm going to get gutted one of these nights. But like that's not like a typical fear for everybody. Everybody, if you go outside, has someone walking at you. And I think that's like the ultimate fear that if you can,
Right.
sell that. Oh, it's
They
so
could
good.
be anywhere or anywhere, right? It's just sort
Right.
of, yeah, 100%. No, I love it. Those, like you said, that is the film that you sort of see and then it just sticks with you
Mhm.
afterwards. And yeah, and always like sort of harps on something that you're afraid of, right? Or just gets at you something, like sort of what Jaws did for the water, right?
Mhm. And I think
Um, yeah.
kind of like with my writing too, like I'm doing books that are goosebump-esque, and goosebump really every book was like a different phobia, a different fear, a different idea that I think every like child at some point has had, like, well, what if like mummies were real? Or what if, my teacher was an evil guinea pig from outer space? Like, I feel like that like this movie is perfectly in tone with that for an adult audience, and there's just so many like weird little things about it too that like make it interesting. Like they didn't just shoot it flat out. Like you have I'm pretty sure she's like the sister of the main character. She's like reading a book on like a makeup mirror, and
Hmm.
it's like so like it's like she's reading an ebook, and this was like what, 2014, and those are like brand new, but this thing looks futuristic, but they look in like a really run down suburban, like Midwest. Like there's just so many like weird contradictions in the movie that like make it more interesting had they just not included that. But they're like, oh yeah,
Right.
let's get a like really intricate shot of like this PDF reader that she has that's like literally this big, that she can only read like 10 words on it at a time, and she's just constantly scrolling and reading it in the background. Like, it's so fun.
Right, right. Like, so what random stuff can you throw in there, just to make you sort of those little extra layers, right? That just sort of make you scratch your chin a little bit, like,
I mean, it wouldn't be a problem, this sort of concept, if you happen to find yourself as like a really rich or affluent person who has, I don't know, like a house on the other side of the world. You just spend
hmm,
half the year over there and then you fly back. Like, is this monster thing just like walking? Because it's going to get to water eventually, right? It's not going to wait for a boat. Maybe it will. Like,
maybe.
if you get it over the Marina Trench, it'll have to, really kind of traverse to come back up on shore to get you over in France. But oh, it's just such a fun idea too, and so simple, and it's just like it's a chef's kiss, and I think that's why it makes my number 5.
Yeah, I would say sometimes simple is better,
Right, right, always.
because then movies that get too convoluted or a little too in the weeds with mythology or whatever, which it can be fun. I love putting together lore and all that, but sometimes the simple ideas go a long way.
I mean, if you look at like every horror franchise that has had a successful first or second movie, it just progressively gets harder to watch because they're trying to either change what made the first one a thing or like
Mhm.
add more lore to it. Like I'm thinking about like Freddy Krueger, or they even did it with like the Friday the 13th series, where it's like he never really died. He was just out here in this hut, worshiping his mom's sweater, and her decapitated head. Like, no, just have him be like this myth. But like, you keep coming back to it, and those first movies are so simple, and I think this one you could extrapolate on and make it go in any direction, which is kind of fun for a filmmaker. And it's surprising that it's taken over 10 years to get the second one.
Yeah,
I would have
yeah.
thought they would have jumped on that. Like that's a pretty hot IP.
I mean, not to go too much on a segue here or a tangent, but I mean, look at 28 years later, we're finally getting that. You know,
Right.
sometimes it just takes a while, I guess.
I mean, it did make sense. You have to do the days, then the weeks, and then you really have to wait for the years.
Yeah. Well,
When
we
you,
skip months, so you know.
yeah, I guess that's right. Duh.
I know. I said when we were on a coffee crypt, you were saying like they should do months as like a little TV series, sort of like a in between,
In
if
between,
it
yeah,
does well, you know.
yeah, yeah.
But all right. So it follows your number five. What's your number four?
So, I feel like It Follows being on the list is one of only two more recent films that have made my list,
Mhm.
and honestly, like It Follows kind of was like a blip in an ocean of a lot of uninspired things. Like I'm not a big fan of like the Conjuring series. They're fun. They're just not really like I know the true story of like the Warren, so I'm like,
Mhm.
like okay. Like Annabelle, like all those types of movies. Saw were fun, but like, again, it just gets progressively weirder and weirder until like 10 years later you have Saw X, which was I love Saw X. But again, there's just like a whole lot of nothing too new again. Like there's nothing that's too upsetting to the level that like you just have to think about it over and over again. Until Jordan Peele came on the scene. And Jordan Peele has made just banger after banger. Get Out was on my list, and then that got dethroned by Us, and then
Yeah,
his newest one, Nope, is what's fourth on my list, just because
it's great.
I'm a big like action fan. Like I'm not
Mhm.
like, like I have to watch like Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, but I really appreciate from a filmmaker standpoint, like what goes into like planning and choreographing and just doing stuff that's huge. And
Oh yeah.
you look at Get Out, and Get Out again is such a simple picture. Like in terms of like Get Out to Nope, it's oh my gosh, like it's like you got what, eight people, like eight main characters plus extras, and it's all on like
Yeah.
one isolated set basically.
Yeah,
To
yeah,
us,
yeah, yeah. Get Out is very like simple in terms of scope, right?
yeah, and then you go to Us, and it's just like it's the same thing, but it's kind of cranked up a notch. And the same with Nope, like it all happens on main character's farmland and the ranch that they have. But it just takes it to like an impossibly new crazy level. And I remember it came out and I saw it opening day all by myself because everybody that was, wanted to go with me was busy. So I was like, I'm gonna go see it. If it's good, I'll go see it again with you. And we literally went back the next day when everyone was free to go and see it. And I was just as excited and thrilled.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and like all the stuff that I'd remembered about it, like I feel like I misremembered it because I watched it again and it was like watching something brand new and it was like scaring me in different ways. And I was like, I, haven't really experienced this before. And I had a friend who also, film school and did all this stuff, and he hated it. And he was just like, "Yeah, I didn't like all the bits with like, the chimpanzee." And I was just like, "Oh no, that like explains everything." Like, and I had to break it down for him. I'm like, "It's so awesome." Like, they explain the problem with this character and why all this alien stuff is happening with a simple scene with this monkey going rogue. Like, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's poetry. He's like, "Oh man, I'm gonna have to watch that again to catch that."
Well,
But
it's just sort of when they tell it's just the chimpanzee, the way I read it was that it's just the message within the film. I mean, it's just sort of the microcosm of like spectacle and, like pretty much like what gets us into these sort of big stories and these big arcs, right?
And like on like surface level, it feels like okay, we have to have something that's scary. We have to kind of like
Mhm.
a lot of producer notes will be like, having worked on like two different horror pictures as like an actor, you sometimes get reshoots or like recalibrations while you're shooting where they're like, we have to kind of amp it up or we have to add stuff in
Mhm.
to make it more scary. And like the last picture I did was a clown film, and their notes that they got from the studio that bought it was like it needs some more scares. It's good, but it's a slow burn, so they needed more stuff. And so by the time I finally got to see it, um, it got to a part where it like completely went off from where I was remembering what we shot, and I'm like, I don't remember this scene. I'm like,
Yeah.
and on surface, that's what Nope feels like at first, but then you realize like this character is tempting fate because he believes that like this crazy chimpanzee, he's the one that he can control it. Like he can be like the person to like make this a reality. And like that leads him down the path with the alien and all this stuff. And it's just, it's so good. Oh, I might go watch that again after this.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's definitely worth a rewatch. It's been a minute since I've seen it. I think I've once in theaters. I think I saw it again at home.
Mhm.
But yeah, Us is my favorite of his trilogy so far.
Yeah.
But he just I love sort of every each film. He's just sort of slices another niche within the subgenres of horror, right?
Mhm.
And so this was sort of like his action sci-fi. And I know his fourth one's coming out, I think next year or something. I read it's in the works.
Mhm. I know he's producing Monkey Man, which looks really good with Dev
He's
Patel.
producing that one, but his next directorial, I think, is next year. I think.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I'm excited for it just because, like, the music in the movies too are so good. Like, I've listened to the Nope like soundtrack like thousands of times, and I'm not even being
Mhm,
facetious when I say that. Like, it was a workout
right.
mix for a long time. Like the scene like where he gets on the horse and he's running with like the thing to try to like get it to
Mhm,
come in is one of my favorite movie like scores of all time. Like that is it's
mm,
so good, and seeing it on the big screen multiple times. Oh my gosh, if you see that movie, if you haven't, see it on a big screen. It just feels so just the way that it comes in too. It's like people have done Aliens and yeah, he's got a little bit of a twist to it, but like just the scope of it and just like it's so immaculate. It's so
mhm.
scary in just like the simplest way
It's
of not
beautiful too.
yeah,
Just like the wide shots, like towards the end of the film, with the you finally see what it is, uh, and and then you get like the small intimate, which is beautifully shot, but like when it's eating everybody.
yeah.
I
Oh
love
yeah,
that.
that's the scariest shot in the movie. Like, no doubt. Like the first scare in the movie is like kind of like a signs, like M. Night Shyamalan signs where it's like you see something, but you don't know if you saw it. And it's like,
Mhm.
and then you have like the really good stuff in the barn, and it's like, okay, this is what it ramps up to. That scene where they're all like in the intestines, just being like squeezed to death and just up there for hours before it finally like pops them
Yeah.
all and just rains. It's
Ooh,
masterpiece. It's
the
so good.
rain scene, like that's like one of my favorite parts of the movie too.
I thought it was gonna be a little cheesy because I believe they showed it in the trailer, and I'm just like, "Oh, cool, a house covered in blood." But, like, when you realize how it's doing that, and it's not just like a goofy 1940s, like, "Ooh, look at it's
It's raining
raining
blood,
blood."
yeah.
Yeah, and it actually has, like, a purpose, like, it's
Mhm.
like it's so
No, it
fun.
works within the context of the movie, like, to a T.
Especially when you see and all those people whose blood that came from, like, so good.
Yeah.
The, like, car keys and stuff falling out.
Oh, man. No, yeah, no, it's a very epic film. I just like you said, like, I just love how each film, he just gets a little bit more epic, and I
Mhm.
wonder, because Nope was so epic, if he's gonna rein it in for the next one. I'm very curious.
Potentially, it was like Edgar Wright, right? So you had Shaun of the Dead in his
Mhm,
trilogy, at least upwards to The World's End, and he kind of made the pit stop with Scott Pilgrim, which I think is like his epic of epics. But like
mhm.
in terms of that trilogy, like The World's End is absolutely like ahead and above everything else in terms of just like the scope and how well he like does everything to a T. Like Hot Fuzz, really improved upon Shaun of the Dead and like the timing and just kind of like the visual, but Shaun of the Dead is still like the funniest of them. Like it's
Yeah.
we could sit here and talk for hours about this stuff.
I know, we gotta get to your number 3.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. What are we
But
doing?
Nope is great.
Yeah. So number 3, this is, you kinda alluded to seeing things at an age which you probably were too young to have seen things. I'm sure everybody has been there. And the one that stands out for me the most was not Scream. Scream almost made my list, but just inched out, because this film, Nightmare on Elm Street, which has been talked about, up and down on this channel and everybody's channel. Number 3, Nightmare on Elm Street for me was the movie that, like, the very first movie that actively scared me.
Mhm, I've had my Freddy nightmares.
It wasn't necessarily a nightmare because I would go for down to my grandparents for the summer, and we would go to garage sales, and my mom would give me like $40 for like 2 months. And it's like whatever you want to buy, but if you spend all your money, you're out. So of
That's it.
course, like the first garage sale we stop at, that $40 is gone. Um, and so we get to this other one, like a week later, and they have hundreds, thousands of VHSs everywhere. And I saw Back to the Future Part 2 because the summer before I got my VHS copy of Back to the Future, and I was like, oh yeah, it's my favorite movie. I watched it like twice a day for, I want to say, like 4 months. Like it was the movie for me. And so I saw Back to the Future Part 2, and I was like, shit, I have to get this. Yeah, I don't have any money. And so my grandpa, my step grandpa, he was a hard ass. And I was like, can I have $1 to get this movie? And he was like, well, do you have any money? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, too bad. And I was like, ah. So we all got in the car, and I'm just like in the back, like, oh. And then he's like looking at me in the rearview mirror, and he holds up $1 and he's like, go get it. I was like, yeah, one time grandpa has a win. Grabbed that $1, went running back, could not find Back to the Future Part 2 to save my life. And so the first thing I found was a movie I'd always wanted to watch. It's Nightmare on Elm Street on VHS. So I handed the guy $1. He said, enjoy. And I went running back to the car, right? And I got in the car, and like I'm buckling up, and I noticed like we're not going anywhere. And then he's looking at me still in the mirror, and he goes, what'd you get? I was like, oh, I wanted to get Back to the Future Part 2. And he's like, let me see it. So I handed it over to him, right? He goes, just as I thought. And we drove off, and I was like, oh man, he's going to destroy that. He's going to throw it away or whatever. But I saw in their bedroom underneath their TV, he had hit it right there. So in the middle of the night, I went crawling in on all fours, like military style, over the dogs, got it in my mouth, crawled out, went down into the unfinished basement. So you would go down the stairs, and you'd have to go through like a hallway of unfinished basement, like where there's like pipes and wires and like steam and, yeah.
To get to the
there. And I watched that movie at like 2 a.m, and I was like, that wasn't so scary until I had to go back through that hallway. And I was like picturing like steam coming out and like, something around the corner, like grabbing onto the metal pipes. And I spent the rest of the night down in the living room down there.
Was that done?
I was like, okay, yeah. And that's another like good, like, real life usage of you're, standing for the bus and someone walks at you and you're like, just it enables you to like immediately jump back into that movie. And I've never forgotten that feeling after watching Nightmare on Elm Street. Was just like, this is real.
Yeah.
This is absolutely a nightmare.
Well, just the idea that like you're not safe when you sleep is so effective.
I've grown fonder of the movie like the more I've gotten older and seen it. Again, simplicity, like it's so good. It's such a like unique idea too. Like not even like what Freddy becomes or what Freddy is. Like Freddy could have been anything. Just the idea alone that you're so vulnerable while you're sleeping. You're so, susceptible to being attacked or like, not being able to defend yourself, because we've all had dreams like we can't run or, we can't do anything. And like, just that to be like the arena of horror is great. And then you add in Freddy, and Freddy, even in like that first movie, like shines through and like, just tantalizing everybody and kind of like leading them on before he's like, it's such a good one.
And he's not as quippy in the first movie. He has some good one-liners, but they're more menacing in that first one, right? And then he gets real stand-up comedian.
Welcome to prime time, bitch.
Which is amazing. I mean, it's great.
I think that's the savior of those later movies, is that goofiness that is having fun with it.
I mean, my guilty pleasure is the fourth one. It's just so 80s. There's like a training montage. There's like it's so ridiculous. But that first one is just so impactful. I mean, that's quintessential like horror history right there. Did your grandpa ever find out you watched it?
Yeah, he found me down there. Because I wasn't able to, return the tape back. So I was found out. I was a very sheltered inside kid. Like he was like, military. He had like all the Boy Scout medals on the wall, and like he's always outside. But he was older, right? And so he'd be like, you need to go outside more. I'm like, okay, Grandpa, let's go to the pool. And he's like, I can't go out there. I'll get heat stroke. I'm like, well, then I'm not going to the pool. I'm going to stay right here and watch some more Dragon Ball Z. Yeah. So I feel like Nightmare on Elm Street really kind of like opened me up in terms of like, I was already on that path with like Goosebumps and like a lot of those books that I was consuming. But like to really have a movie like that And then I believe when I went home, I kind of like went through my mom's like movies that she had, and I found Scream,
Mhm.
which just completely like set that anew. And it was just so grounded in reality of like this could actually happen. Like if I'm friends with Matthew Lillard, uh, bad things might happen, you know?
Yes. Oh man, but that's a great Scream's a great movie to see. Like, well, I always say like if anyone's asking for like horror education, I say like
Mhm.
watch like Halloween, Friday, Nightmare on Elm Street, then watch Scream.
Yeah.
Because then at least those three good movies get referenced in it, and it's sort of a just great way to understand the history of horror.
That Scream trilogy, I think, is pretty strong. Like even the fourth movie, I have a little bit of a fondness for.
Oh, the
Like,
fourth one's fun. I
yeah,
mean, I think especially like retroactively, like 10 years later or so, going back and watching and be like, he
right,
made
yeah,
some good
it holds up.
points.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, are we ready to move on to number two?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, my number two is kind of a more recent. It's not a recent movie by any stretch of the means, but it's a recent favorite that I have just like head over heels for, and not for the reason that most people usually are, but it's Hellraiser.
Oh, I love Hellraiser.
And oh my gosh, Hellraiser is such a unique premise because I mean, you have any sort of dabbling with horror. You've got the Freddy, you've got the Jason,
I'm just
and then
bringing
you've
out
got
my
oh,
little
yep,
puzzles.
there it is.
This one's a Rubik's cube, and this one is just more of a
Oh,
stationary.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get that at, like a Halloween Express or something? Is that like
No, I forget the Rubik's cube. I think I got just like off of Amazon or something, and
okay, cool,
then
cool.
the other thing I got off of like Etsy.
Yeah,
Like someone made that. Yeah.
that's awesome. Oh man, but like I've just always seen Pinhead, right? And so like in the back of my brain, I'm just like, oh man, these movies are gonna be awesome. If Friday the 13th is this good, I can't wait to see that. And I had only seen it on TV, which is very like that shouldn't be allowed. That should be outlawed. Like cutting down a movie like that is only fine and fun to do if it's like an action movie and they're like flubbing out swears. Like Die Hard 2, Yippee Mr. Falcon is like perfect editing from TBS. But to see Hellraiser on TV, I was just like, this sucks.
I know.
This sucks. Like,
Really waters it down.
well, like Pinhead's like the face of the franchise too, which it
Mm.
didn't obviously start that way. But to see that he's in the movie for like 5 minutes, and it's like, and I just like in my brain, I could never catch the movie right when it started. And so like I had no idea like the actual flow of the movie until I sat down years later and like was watching stuff around Halloween. I was like, yeah, I'll check out Hellraiser again. This movie was stupid, but put it on, fell in love with it. I'm like, this is one of the greatest made movies. Find out that the director, Clive Barker, also wrote the original novella, The Hellbound Heart, and I picked that sucker up. And the dude is dangerous with his words. Like he is so good in that story. And to kind of see like the translation from what he wrote to that reminded me of like Neil Gaiman when he wrote Stardust, which if you've ever read Stardust, I'm sorry, but if you've ever seen the movie Stardust, like 10 years later, he really like figured out what made the story, like the core story work, and then like blew it up and made it perfect. Kind of how I feel with Hellbound Heart to Hellraiser.
Yeah.
And it's so good. Like we've recently just like went through all of the movies, which Hellraiser gets like to a really gross, gross, straight to DVD, life that is very sad that they don't know what to do with it. And then the Hulu one was a little bit of a letdown. It was just kind of like, it had the same problems like It Chapter 2 has, where it's like
Mhm.
literally the exact same scene over and over again. Like all the kids separate, they all go get scared and then run away, and then it repeats that 5 times. That's kind of what the 2022 Hellraiser movie reminded me of. But this first one is it's so good. It's got such great set pieces. The music, like right up there with Nope. Like that was like
Yeah.
like a cool down worked out, mix that I would listen to, or like if I'm trying to read something spooky at night or write, that's my go-to soundtrack. And it's just what hasn't been said about Hellraiser already, right?
I just love like the dreamy sort of almost like horror soap opera quality of it. Like
Yeah.
it's just so like
Like the
I don't
flashback scenes.
like the flashbacks and everything with Julia and Frank and like just Kirsty's fantastic. I just love just sort of the dark side of like just sexuality in general that it explores. And
Mhm.
oh man, yeah, it is just so, I mean, obviously people know it, talk about it, love it, whatever, but it, it's not as widely recognized as I feel like it should be.
And I think that has to do with all the sequels that have just not understood the assignment at all, like, even from the second one.
Yeah.
Um, Clive had some sort of, producing feedback on that, but it's you read the book and it's so specifically this that it's not about the Cenobites. It's about the human condition of wanting more and trying to get more and then trying to, undo their mistakes. And Frank, ultimately escaping the grip hold that these creatures from another realm have on him. And just that's the scary part. It's never about the Cenobites. It's about what people do to get ahead in life or to get back into life.
Mhm.
That is really the truly scary thing, and how like he's able to pull, Julia into this, how he kills, you know, is it Larry? Is that his name? The
Yeah,
dad?
I think it's Larry.
I read the book, like I just read it like last week. So like I think his name in that is it's something different. So like my brain's all mixed up with everyone's names because all of them are except for Kirsty are different, which she's not the daughter in that book. She's just a friend who's in love with the Larry character, which I was like, okay.
Interesting switch.
Yeah. Now you're
Lover
the
to daughter.
No, it just works so better because there's no reason for the book for her to like be in the house, like to catch
Right.
Frank and Julia. And so like it makes more sense that she's like not living with them, but she still has like immediate access to their life. And there's a reason why, her and Julia have this distance instead of like Julia's like, you're just trying to steal my man, even though I don't really want my man. I can, sell him to you for a discounted price if you want. Um, you know, it just works so well. And I don't think any of the sequels have ever truly lived up to that. Like the
No.
third movie, as fun as it is just completely like, how cool would it be if we had a compact disc Cenobite?
Which
Yeah,
is cool, but
it's
yeah.
cool as shit. But like, it's not what makes the movies good. It's like if you looked at Nightmare on Elm Street and you're just like, we got to have the funniest killer in this movie. Like if you had Freddy from like Freddy's Dead in Nightmare on Elm Street 1, that movie would just not work, you know?
No.
And so that's like the level of Pinhead is like, oh, it could be so much more without it being just the Pinhead show. But I
Mm,
digress. Oh, I love Hellraiser.
I know,
And
I know. I didn't mind the Hulu one as much as you did. I sort of appreciated at least them bringing it back to some resemblance of, because that, like you said, that Dimension Video, like just marathon of crappy straight to video, like
uh-huh.
they're going in video games, doing cult stuff. I don't know what the hell. I was just, that was something else.
Yeah, like I don't know how no one's like understood fundamentally like what made the first one good, not necessarily as a movie, but like as a story. Because they tread the same thing. It's kind of like the Saw instance where every Saw movie follows a detective. And it's
Hmm.
like, I don't care about detectives. It's been 5 movies with a detective. I bet he dies at the end. I bet she doesn't make it.
Right.
That it's kind of like the Hellraiser was the trailblazer for that sort of like straight to DVD, and a lot of
Yeah,
those
you
were
focus on the wrong thing that made it good. I mean, you pick a
yeah,
good element of it, sure, but not the main element or like the heart of it, right? You just pick
right.
the right with Saw. It's like you get the detective, or you get like, okay, we got to ramp up the traps. But I'm like,
Mhm.
that's not what makes the first one so good. There are
I was
hardly any traps in the first one.
yeah, I was really intrigued with like the Hulu one because like the trailer and kind of like what I had read about it, like I really liked the cast. I really liked the idea because Pinhead, that's not his real name, in the book is described as genderless. And so
Mhm.
to have, a different person playing Pinhead the way that they, portrayed it was great. It was fine. And I really felt like they were on the right track, right?
Yeah.
Or it's not necessarily about like, I'm going to open the puzzle. Oh no, bad things are happening. Where it was like you open the puzzle and like basically kill all of your friends, like make them do it. I think it should have been like you open it up and something awful happens, but then
Yeah.
you're like, it can't get much worse than this, and you just kind of deceive yourself into it getting worse, and like the configurations getting worse and worse until you've like completely gone off the deep end. And as like one of only a handful of people who's able to go to that extreme, that's how you become a Cenobite. You know, like they're like,
Mm,
welcome, like you're fucked up, join us, come on. What do you
right.
do you like compact discs? Like, you know? So it missed the mark just a little bit for me, but
Yeah.
the visuals in it were really fun, and it feels like the closest one to like the first movie.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, getting close isn't the same thing as succeeding, right? I think, unfortunately, right? It's
Yeah.
like he's like, okay, I'll take this. I don't know, dollar store version of. Nice. No, I can't. I think it's better than a dollar store version. Those direct-to videos
Yes.
where those are the dollar store versions.
This is the Five Below version.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. Shell out a couple more bucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, maybe we'll get back to it. But it's one of those things that maybe we don't even really have to touch it again. Maybe it's just let the original exist as it is, and you know,
They'll never do that. If there's money to be made. No, really, like TV shows have come so far in like such a short amount of time to like being able to tell a wider story. Like a Saw TV show would rule. Shout out if anybody in the comments or watching this has any connections with Lionsgate. I have written a Saw season 1 through 3
what?
Bible. Yeah, we'll talk about it after this. But
That's
yeah,
awesome.
no, a Hellraiser
Yeah.
TV show would rule too.
Wasn't there a rumor that they would do a Hellraiser show?
Mm-hmm. That's I think what it originally was, and then they kind of were like, well, let's just make a movie, I guess.
Yeah, but a show would be great. I mean, you could really, going back to like that soapy, dark soap quality of the original, like you really could flesh out. It's like some good complex characters that way.
Because like they have the comics, which Clive actually had partaken in, like
Mhm.
the writing and configuring of it. And those are interesting. Like it's like a team of people going around stopping these different boxes, like they're different shapes and like
Right.
different items from opening because different Cenobites come out. But then it gets like really weird because like Pinhead and Kirsty switch places. So Kirsty's like the new Pinhead in hell, and it's like, is it in hell? I didn't think it was in hell. I thought it was like its own realm. Okay.
Right. Like
It just
a
gets
hell
really weird.
dimension of sorts, right?
Yeah. Like it's so bad you won't get to go anywhere else but that. Like you
Right.
don't get a choice. You're just stuck there as the new Laserdisc monster. But
Is that what you would be as a Cenobite? A laser disc?
oh man, what would I be as a Cenobite? What would you be? Let me think about this.
Oh man, that's hard. I would be. I have to like look around my room. Something like a video gamey kind of one would be kind of cool. Like if I had like a keyboard or something, or like I don't know, like I'm almost thinking like a motherboard, something computery would be kind of fun.
You just look like a giant Wiimote walking around.
Yeah, my Wii person.
Yeah. I think it would be really cool to be like, yeah, kind of like a computer, but like something that's like really useless, but like really annoying, like the IMDb trivia page. Like I'm constantly like giving you trivia about movies like Tremors 3. You just I don't care. Stop. Like
That's
that's my
someone's hell for sure.
yeah. And then you try to like unplug the Ethernet cable, and I keep going. I'm like, I gotta download it on the database. All right. Have you ever heard of Titanic 2?
With what's her name? Burns, whatever. Yeah, I've heard of Titanic too. It's amazing.
Yeah. All right. Well,
All right. What's your number one?
Well, before I get to number one, I'm gonna talk about my honorable mentions real quick.
Oh, sure. Yeah, go.
So Alien.
Yeah.
I wanted to put this on the list. This is like I had an instructor when I was in college who would watch Jaws on repeat, and it was just like his like go-to like brain boost movie.
Oh, wow.
And so when Alien came out, which I loved, I saw Alien when I was really young. Like it didn't scare me or scar me the way like Nightmare did, but like I heard the music in it, and they released a Blu-ray version where it had an isolated soundtrack, so you could watch the movie with just like the soundtrack on, and it cut out all the
Oh,
other noises, and except for like the annoying like alarms, which is stupid. But I would watch that on repeat. Like that was my go-to background brain boost movie. So Alien, super huge, super influential. We already talked about Saw. Just how goofy you can make something until it goes a little bit too far, and then you have to have like celebrities in it. I'm thinking of like Saw the Final Chapter.
we
Um,
had yeah, you had Link. Oh my God, why am I blanking on his name? But from Lincoln Park and
yeah,
Chester.
yes. I shout out though. I saw the first movie. I joined that like DVD club, where you get like 5 DVDs for a penny, and then
Oh
you have to
yeah,
pay like $500 for each other installment DVD. I got my mom to sign me up for that, and when she wasn't looking, I peeled off one of the stickers for a Disney movie, and I put a Saw on there. So when Saw came in, that was how I was able to see it. But everyone had already seen it, and so I saw it with fresh eyes, and I was just like, cool. And then someone loaned me the second one, and then I was like, what if this is the ending? Like, what about this character? And everybody thought I was stupid. Everyone laughed in my face until the last movie. And I was so smug when it's revealed like the doctor is still, like he's the one
yeah.
that's like getting the medicine and everything. And I was just like, guys, you
What
can't
did I
have the
say?
Princess Bride in just one movie. Carrie Ellis is gonna come back and he's gonna be like the dude behind it. And I'm like, anyway.
That's it. You called it.
Yeah.
It's
We
a good.
talked about
It's a fun twist. Though. That's the cool part of the last one, right? Is like at least we get Carrie back.
well, Saw 10. Have you seen Saw 10?
Oh, 10 is fabulous. 10 is very good.
10 is the perfect Saw movie. Like 1, 2, and 3 are really strong. Like those are like
It's a good trilogy. Those three.
perfect
Yeah.
trilogy. If you like those types of movies, like it didn't get too gory, like it wasn't like all about it. But
Mhm.
Saw 10 has like the thing that every single Saw movie has been missing, and it's the humanity.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it so good by the end, that like John Kramer, I've always said, is a good guy. Like he fundamentally wants to help people and wants to do the right thing. He's just a little misguided himself. And Saw 10 just like completely, like you can't deny it.
Yeah.
He's the dude. Like he's so fucking cool. And you try to fake cure his cancer, well he's gonna get you. Oh man.
It's great. I mean, really, Saw X is really Saw 1.5. It's a great sort of
In betweener.
sojourn kind of middle movie, right?
And that's why a TV show would work so well. There's so much that you can tell in between those movies before John is just a talking tape recorder in a head.
I mean, how long can they get these actors back though? Make them look. There's so much you could squeeze in now in this middle part. They're not getting younger, you know.
I mean, you would have to recast John, but like just make him like somebody who's like in like his 30s or 40s, and so like the cancer hitting him is really big, like it's
Yeah.
really like his whole life kind of comes to an end right there. Because John Kramer, as it is now, is like he's lived his whole life. He's super rich. He's like a contractor, and then like the end of his life kind of abruptly, Anyway,
I mean, there's only so many wigs you can give Shawnee Smith though.
yeah, true.
She's got
It's not good.
she wear like that, like not even like a pussycat wig, but like just that wig was that's the worst part of the movie is her wig.
Yeah. Oh, have you seen? I'm going back to my honorable mention list here. Have you seen Green Room?
That's with
Anton Yelchin.
Anton Yelchin, isn't it? Patrick Stewart in that?
Patrick Stewart is in
Yeah,
it. You've seen that?
yeah, it's very
I
good.
Oh my gosh, that is the one movie that I have never been like. I don't know if I want to say brave enough to rewatch. I've just I saw it in a theater. So I saw it at a pre-screening and I got to talk to like the director afterwards, and like a couple other people from the cast were there. So it was a cool experience to like see the movie and then get to talk to them. I did that with like Cabin in the Woods too, which was really fun to talk to Drew Goddard and
Oh yeah,
Joss Whedon about that. But like I was so shooken up by that movie because never once is it like a monster or is it like unbelievable. Like a lot of those like Scream movies or anything like Saw, that's based in reality, kind of has like a you have to look the other way that okay, this wouldn't really happen. Green Room was so visceral and it was so like shocking because I thought it was gonna go places and I was like, oh, it won't go past that. And then like it just gets worse and worse.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I lost my mind watching that. Especially now that like my brother-in-law, he's in a pretty popular like punk band that tour the world. And so like I can now picture him in that, and it gives me even more reason not to want to watch it. Um, but that's like the only movie I've ever seen that I'm just like, I think I'm good. I don't really want to watch it a
You know, like
second
go back
time.
to it. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think I
like it
rented
makes
it or
me
something.
nervous.
Yeah, yeah. It was like when it hit VOD, I think is when I saw it.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the last one on my honorable mentions is It Comes at Night, which
As not I think that might be like one of the only A24 films I haven't seen.
I I thought I wasn't gonna be impressed, and halfway through the movie, I was like, "Okay, it's what I thought it would be." It's not really like spoiler alert for anybody who does not want to know about It Comes at Night. It's not really about a monster, like, that's kinda what they hype it up to be, like,
Yeah.
there's, like, something outside that comes at night, but it's really more of, like, a family struggle, and it's really more of, like, a how do you survive when things in this very contained life change with the inclusion of other people you can't trust.
Yeah.
And the first time I saw this movie, I felt like I couldn't breathe. Like it ramped up so powerfully. And it wasn't until my wife and I went back and we were talking about it, and I literally was scrubbing through the playhead to find like a specific scene so we could watch about it because we were talking about it. And I realized how the movie was so successful on me and other people who probably never even noticed it. Aspect ratio is such a big deal to me. Like we talked about Edgar Wright and Scott Pilgrim. And
Mhm.
so when an aspect ratio shifts, like it can be really cool. Like in Scott Pilgrim, it's like, you know,
Yeah.
it can be really stupid, like in Christopher Nolan movies, where he's just like, I'm going to do IMAX now, and so it goes from like really nice, crisp, like to like
Right, right.
full frame. And like in The Dark Knight Rises, it was just doing this every scene at the last movie, and I was like, stop. Um, but this movie, when shit starts getting real, it just keeps
Oh,
everything
that's
just
very
feels
cool.
so congested until it comes to like the breaking point, and then it goes back. And it wasn't until I was scrubbing through that I was like, that is brilliant.
That's
It's so
effective, yeah.
subtle. Oh my gosh. I hate that you haven't seen it, but like when you do, just keep that in mind. Like it's so effective that like if I didn't go through, I would have never noticed, because you just don't. It's
It
so
happens so
subtle
slowly, yeah.
over like an hour and a half. Oh my gosh, it's good. And everything just feels so like claustrophobic by the end. Oh, it's great.
Wow. So really the whole film, it's just kind of progressively getting that's so cool.
Yeah, it like things are like this by the end, but it just you're so invested, hopefully, in the movie and the characters that it oh, it's so good. It's like so good you shouldn't notice it, but of course, anyway.
Now I'll know to look for it, but hopefully I forget about it as I
Yeah,
start because I'll get so into it that I'll be like, "Oh, wait," and then,
yeah.
you know.
But if anybody else has seen it, and if you notice that, like, let us know because
Yeah, yeah.
I've talked to people who have seen it and they don't know what the hell I'm talking about. They also say, "Get away from me, you IMDb robot." But let's talk about my last one.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the movie, not just a horror movie that I feel defined me, but the movie in general that defined me as a person and as a creative is 1980s Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Oh my gosh. Have you seen The Shining?
Have hold on, let's see if I think well, I mean, it's not that fancy, but I got my little Jack and Wendy pops.
Yeah. Oh
I'll
man.
put them here for that.
My wife got me like a little key holder that has like the room 237 on it.
Mhm.
Like the little,
I have more
like
Shining stuff elsewhere. It's just like, they just keep me company, these 2.
the first time I saw The Shining was in a movie called Twister, 1987's
Oh,
Twister.
I know, when it's on the screen, right?
Yeah. And Twister was one of my mom's favorite movies. She bought surround sound just to experience Twister. the way she remembered it in the theaters. I'm like, you're crazy. Because you can clearly watch Star Wars Episode 1's the pod race scene on that, and that's so much cooler. But I watch Twister all the time, and I was always like, what's that scary movie with the twins? Like,
Yeah, what
and
are
she
they
was like, oh, it's
watching?
nothing. You don't ask. And so obviously, I would ask every time we watched it because we watched it like 2 or 3 times a year. And I got older, and I got to the point where I could go to the library, and I rented The Shining, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna watch that scary movie. And I watched it, and it was the most boring movie 16-year-old Squall had ever seen in his life. And I had to watch it twice because I kept falling asleep. And the next time we watched Twister, I pointed out, hey, that scene with the twins can't happen 5 minutes later where Jack's ripping through the door, because that's almost like an hour in length of the movie.
Right.
And she's like, how do you know that? And I was like, but
Wow.
the crazy thing is, as much as I hated The Shining when I watched it, I kept going back to it. I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't explain why I wanted to watch that movie again. It was like the exact opposite of Green Room, where I knew it was going to suck. I knew I was going to hate it personally. And I would still want to watch it. I would still want to put 2.5 hours of my life away to watch this movie that I know actively I hated.
Mm.
And just every year I would watch it again and again and again. And it wasn't until I was in college. I was 19 years old. This is like my 4th or 5th time watching it. I decided to put it on at like midnight, and I'm watching it, and I'm kind of like, doing other work and kind of like, glancing up at it now and then. And just this like goose flesh broke all out over my body. And I got so immediately like it like clicked, right? Because I read the book and I'm like, oh, the book's scary. The movie sucks. The book's scary. Stephen King, yeah, he's right. He should hate this movie. But no, I watched it, and I got a cold sweat. Goose flesh broke out over my body. And it was the scene where Jack Nicholson confronts Wendy at the typewriter. And if you've seen the movie, that is the scariest scene in the entire thing. It's not him coming through the door. It's not the elevator with the blood and like, little body falling out. It's Jack. Because the entire film, every film you watch is usually told from a perspective. And the weird thing that The Shining does, the very first opening shot is this like swooping helicopter shot going through the valley up to the mountainside. And every shot is really far away. Like you'll have people that are like walking in the background and they're like this big, walking across the scene. You have the most iconic shot in the movie where it's following Danny on his little tricycle. The whole movie is very voyeuristic. And it wasn't until that scene where it is looking in on Wendy that Jack previously has made an agreement with the hotel that he steps into the frame, and the rest of the movie follows Jack's perspective, because Jack has become the embodiment of the hotel. And that blew my mind. Like it, again, with It Comes at Night, like it was so subtle that if you got it, if you were in the right mindset, you wouldn't necessarily understand why it got scarier there. You didn't understand like what it implies. And it's just so masterfully done. Like, and there's so many like things that have come out about The Shining, like Room 237, the documentary has a lot of fun, tangents it goes off in.
Yeah.
I ended up writing my film thesis off of it, and just like who the main character of The Shining is. And nobody in my class could answer it correctly. They were like, oh, it's Jack. Oh, it's Danny. Wendy? The cook, Dick. No, it's the hotel, like I've never seen a movie like it. And I was so worried when Dr. Sleep was announced, because I like Mike Flanagan. I like the Dr. Sleep book. Where is it? I like what Stephen King did with Dr. Sleep, but it just feels like it came out of place of spite because the movie he hated. And so everything about this, which the movie changed things, like in The Shining book, the hotel explodes, it's gone. But in the movie, it's so much scarier because that shit's still there. Who knows who's going to get to anybody else?
There, what's next? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like so cool because like you have Danny who has the Shining, Dick Halloran who have the Shining, who see these things. Danny's a little more attuned to it, so he sees, stuff inside the room. He sees things that he has to close his eyes to, like the twins. And we don't know if Jack's seeing that, because Danny obviously got a Shining from someone. Didn't get it from Shelley Duvall. He didn't get it from, Wendy, but he did potentially get it from Jack. And so if Jack's seeing it or not doesn't make sense, but it would be like why he goes crazy, right? And the moment that Dick Halloran gets killed by Jack by the hotel has taken on all of these spirits, and it has grown in power and power and power. And Dick Halloran is such a powerful entity and force of The Shining that the hotel explodes like a funhouse. And so now Wendy is able to see all this stuff. It's so good. And
I
what
don't
I
even
love
think I picked up on that. Like the fact that that was sort of when Wendy started to see
the
things.
catalyst of it, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. You revealed something new for me.
And I don't know if that's like supposed to be it, but that's like my personal.
But it feels accurate. Like you saying it feels right. Like the way you put it together. I'm like,
And then when you think about like, why does the hotel want Danny? Well, it wants to be powerful, and like it can potentially like reach out now and touch people. And like Wendy, is running away from it. But I feel like if it got Danny as well, it would be able to just ensnare anybody that walks into it. Which is kind of the cool reason in Mike Flanagan's Dr. Sleep that it's still there, but it's like run down because nobody wants to do it, because everybody's probably going in there and seeing all this shit.
yeah.
And then they're like, okay, close it down, it's haunted. But if it got Danny, then it would have been dangerous. Then it would have been like, a monster that people would, find themselves trapped in. But Dr. Sleep, what a fantastic hybrid.
I love that movie.
Oh my, it took the best parts of the Shining and Dr. Sleep books, and it just gave it the aesthetic that the Shining sequel truly needed as a movie. And it made me love The Shining even more. It made me love Dr. Sleep. So good. The performances are great. I don't know about Ewan McGregor as Danny, but I get over that pretty fast as I get into the movie. I'm like,
I thought he was. I think the standout. I love Rebecca Ferguson. I think the True Knot are a great set of characters.
And Abra, the actress who plays Abra, is fantastic.
Fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just like, okay, he doesn't really look like Jack. Doesn't really look like Danny. But 10 minutes into the movie, I'm like, it doesn't matter. This is fun.
No. The girl they got to play Wendy in the flashback, she was pretty spot on.
She's my personal favorite in the entire movie. Like her 3 scenes that she has, amazing. It's so good. But yeah, The Shining has just every turn of the way. Like when I think of how to do something creatively, or like when I'm in a rut, like it's that movie that I turn to. It's that one I put on. Like it really is like the anchor of, I feel like, who I am. Like there's so much you can get out of that movie, and it's not just a simple horror film, which I believe could be said about every horror film. And everyone on my list and everybody else's list that comes here is that there's something that makes it more than just like, spooky,
Yeah.
Like The Shining just is the pinnacle, like the epitome of what a horror movie can become, and like the Overlook Hotel, it's only gotten stronger over the years.
I mean, that movie ages like fine wine, right? It just, I feel like it just doesn't, it doesn't age in like that bad way. I feel like you go back, there's new layers, like there's just such a timeless mark that movie leaves, right? Exactly. Like I think I probably saw it younger than you did. I think I must have been like 9 or 10, I think, when I first saw it.
Any age, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was like, but it's different when you see it older, right? I think as a kid, you're seeing it through Danny's perspective. And it's scary as a kid, right? Because you want to trust your parents, and clearly, well, they don't got it. And then as you get older, right, you peel back the layers and you get to see it from a different perspective. That's sort of how I view Poltergeist too. Is like, I think when I saw it as a kid, you see it through kids' eyes and it's terrifying. And now seeing it as a parent, as an adult, you go back and you're like, whoa, totally different, like, set of fears unlocked. So I feel like that's true with The Shining,
You have to judge how good of a parent you are by, have you lost a child inside of their closet?
Well, it's just that and that question of like, what the hell would you do in that
Yeah.
moment? Like, what are you willing to risk to save your family,
Mhm.
right? And then The
Right.
Shining is sort of like, what do you do when your family is the danger, right?
And there's
It's sort of
no
like,
running from it too.
and there's no running from it. Yeah.
'Cause I feel like that's another, like, unspoken thing about The Shining is that Wendy has that really, really compacted speech when she's talking with the doctor after Danny has his fainting spell
Hmm.
about Jack's drinking, and if you've read the book, you can kinda peel it back a little bit. The movie alludes to more of, like, it was like a sexual nature between the abuse of him and Danny, but the fact that they left where they were to move to Boulder, and now they're moving somewhere else, like, they're constantly on the run from this thing that nobody wants to talk about until they literally can't go anywhere and they have to talk about it, and it becomes volatile and it becomes dangerous, and it's a perfect film. It's
Yeah.
so good.
Well, your love for it is so obvious, and I really appreciate you sharing your love for it with
Of
me.
course.
Anything else on either any of the films or any about The Shining? Any sort of last thoughts? We can go on for another hour too.
Huh. No. I think I left it all there, like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh. I I can tell that these are good choices that I've made because each one of them I've been excited to potentially when do I get to rewatch them, you know?
yeah.
And I think that's the true testament of what a good movie is. I mean, you could probably contradict myself and say like, "Well, I won't watch The Green Room again." But like, I understand its merits. Like, I can replay that movie in my head. Like, it has scarred me to the point, like,
To be fair, it wasn't on your list. It was an honorable mention.
it's true. Um, but yeah, all of these movies, I'm just like, dang, I've got the rest of the day off. Maybe I should go watch these. Which
It's
one
funny when
though?
horror is like, I always try to explain to someone like how horror film could be a feel good movie or
Yeah,
something, and I'm like, it can be. It's sometimes it's fun to be scared, and you know,
especially like grappling with like personal issues too. If you can see someone else do it and make it out alive, like final
mhm.
girl their way through it, why can't I final girl it? Um, my little motivational rant for the episode there.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much for having me on to talk and rant
Oh,
about these
thank
movies.
you for chatting horror with me today. We're always excited to have you on. Maybe the next one will be Terror Valley 3. I know I didn't really properly talk about them at the beginning because I know this was more about your favorite horror, but
Yeah.
if you haven't checked out Squall's interviews for Terror Valley 1 and 2, they are fantastic, super fun reads. All the goosebump vibes, but definitely doing something new, creative, and exciting with the genre.
It's like Goosebumps, but wholesome.
There
That's
are some wholesome, right? Yeah, I just the characters are great. You make great characters, so
thank you.
yeah.
I
We'll put
can't
all
wait
the link
to
to Squall's
one.
stuff below, and the suggested video at the end. I'll link one of you. Maybe two, one. Which you have a preference? I'll link
Yeah.
one of them on.
Just put the spoiler chat up. Just go in raw. Just here it is.
Just know it. Yeah, yeah. All the spoilers. All right, Squall. Well, thank you again so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you everybody for watching.
Take care, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Hey fam, Newman here from Movies for Days, your non-pretentious easy access movie chat podcast and weekly deep dive into any film from any genre, from any decade with anybody's guess as to how we chose that movie that week. Proud member of the You Run Podcast Network. Check us out where all great podcasts can be heard and on Twitter at Movies Days. Movies is spelled regular, Days is spelled with a Z.